Hello, I'm Jim Miller. I'm here with Terrence Moore. Reggie Turner has the night off. The FlipSide starts right now. Welcome to the show. Tonight we're joined by former state delegate and former county commissioner Leroy Myers.
Yes, good evening.
And of course, Terrence. I don't know whether you guys heard there was an election yesterday.
Yeah, really?
I hate the, let me just say for the record, I hate the squeakers, right? The ones that are so close that you just don't know what's going to happen. In fact, as we shoot this tonight on November 6th, we don't have all of the results yet.
Right.
There are still some states, there are still some races that are too close to call. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with them. But let's start local if we can, and let's start at the top of the food chain on our city of Hagerstown government, the Hagerstown mayor. Terrence, what say you?
This was surprising, probably for maybe because the amount of votes that Stephen Schuette actually still received, and I know we had some conversation about this, about whether or not the write-ins were going to get some votes or not. We had 542 votes came to write-ins, 2,673 votes to Stephen Schuette, who was no longer, he had pulled out of the election many months ago, and Bill McIntyre walking away with almost 7,500 votes.
Yeah, actually that's been updated. It's now 7,950 for Bill. 2855 for Mr. Schuette.
And I think, and this is the problem with write-in votes, I just want to point this out, because it's showing also, I believe, that Whitney Nicole Burnett has 0 votes, and A. Mark Wilkes has 0 votes, but there was 542 votes. And the problem is you have to write the person's name in a certain way for them to be counted for those write-in votes, which looks like it was an issue with doing so. So that just shows how difficult it is to have a strong write-in campaign and have people write the name in specifically to register those votes. But again, I think we knew that McIntyre was going to actually take this running unopposed.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think there's much choice.
Right, the write-ins didn't have strong enough campaigns. But I said this before, there was a segment of people who were just going to vote for the opposite. All right, it had nothing to do with Bill, his politics, anything else, but just representation of what people assume his party was, and they went the opposite direction. And I think that's what showed up in those little over 3,000 votes.
So you're saying the Schuette issue is due to the fact that people purposefully are saying, I'm voting for Schuette because I think Bill McIntyre is in a party that I don't like, even though it's a nonpartisan election.
Absolutely.
Leroy, what say you?
Well, I agree with what you're saying, except for the fact I think we have a very, an electorate that is not really paying attention to the fact that Stephen was not even, being to be considered.
So your notion is that while some of them may have voted that way on purpose, some of them may just think that
did not know.
Yeah.
Did not know that he was not still a candidate. And I find that a lot with people that just are there, and whether they did or didn't know Steve or even Bill McIntyre, whether they wanted to vote against Bill. There's a combination of all of it, but I think that there's still just people that are unaware of what's going on. And
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, the evidence that I have seen, and I have no statistically significant data to prove this, but I think that's a much higher percentage than you would think. Leroy, you and I have talked in the past about former county commissioner John Munson, and thought that the reason he was elected in the first place was because his name, they confused him with Don Munson, who was a state senator for Washington County for many, many years.
I had people say to me, how does he hold 2 positions? And I said, it's not the same person. It's John Munson and Don Munson.
Yeah.
Well, we know, and I think that's the biggest issue that we have. I agree that education and the gap of understanding and people being active. One of the things I called out as well, like there are a lot of people, they may be upset about this election, then stay engaged. for more than once every 4 years. I think there's an opportunity to keep yourself educated, to keep yourself engaged and make informed decisions, and not just walk away from this election and feel like you don't have any civic responsibility again until the next 4 years.
Yeah, if at all, because we
Right.
still know, I mean, in the primary elections, it's what, like 17, 18% turnout. Obviously, the general elections is higher than that, especially when it's a presidential election. I haven't seen any official numbers on turnout at this point. I know that there was a lot more mail-in votes and early voting than has ever been seen before, but it'll be interesting to see what those numbers come out like. Have either of you seen any numbers on participation in Washington County?
Well, we were talking earlier about the fact of, how many registered voters are there that can vote in the city of Hagerstown.
Right.
And I saw, when we looked at number that Bill McIntyre got of 70, not almost 8,000, what's that percentage of?
Yeah.
How many people actually can vote in the city of Hagerstown?
Yeah, a total of 11,370 votes, including for Bill McIntyre, Stephen Schuette, and the write-ins.
Yes.
There are, what, 45,000, give or take, citizens in Hagerstown?
About that, 45,000.
And
yeah.
some of those are not eligible because they're children or whatever the case may be. So,
Or not registered at all.
yeah.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's probably still not a great statistic in terms of turnout.
Well, whenever I ran first time for the House of Delegates, I remember that one of the things that we were figuring into the election was the fact that in Allegheny County, for instance, they were very lucky to get 50% of registered voters to come out and vote. And it was that's a low amount.
Yeah.
Of
And that's of registered voters. That's not of total population.
that's correct.
So
just-
that's the other thing. It's
Yes.
not, to say, well, we've got 140,000 people in Washington County, 70,000 are going to vote. No, we've got 102,000 people registered to vote in Washington County. So 50%, 51,000. That's not so great.
Yeah. Well, the nice thing about what they also do, and what I like, is the fact that they have, the early voting, they have the day of voting, and the mail-in ballots, and the way they've changed things. We used to have to wait like till Thursday, tomorrow, to get the mail-in ballots counted along with the provisional ballots, but now they're all totaled, so it gives you a better idea of who's going to be elected.
Yeah, at least in the state of Maryland, I think
Yeah.
we do a pretty good job. Now,
We do, yes.
The reason that some of the other states aren't called yet is because they have not tallied some of those. So I'm not sure why you wouldn't tally those ahead of time if you've got them, but I guess that's their
Well,
choice.
what they say, there's 43 states that are doing it a little better than others.
Right.
And I believe North Carolina and Georgia and Florida, I mean, you saw how quickly they reported last night and were able to give their, but Pennsylvania wasn't too far behind.
Yeah, because I think
Yeah.
some of them allow the day of election at midnight to start counting those mail-in votes.
That's
Some
correct.
of them don't until the polls actually open. So I think that gap allows others to count quicker than. But I was amazed myself thinking back to 2020 how it was 3-4 days down the
Yes,
line with
yeah.
Well, and
mail-in.
we talked on this show, Terrence,
Yeah.
about the fact that we may not have any results this week. We may not have a presidential result. And of course, we had that at 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. So,
Well, I found it quite odd last night that they could not even report the first vote from Nevada until the last person that was in line voted.
Yes.
Right.
And that's why those results didn't come out for almost 2 or 3 hours later.
And that's, voting rules that are governed by different states, allows for, kind of stretches it, but not as much as we've seen in 2020. And I think a lot of people returned to the polls, actually. I think there was a percentage of people, like myself, that has opted to mail and vote. And I think those people will mail and vote, probably continue to do so. But I think a lot of people mailing in their vote was the only option at that point in time, considering where we were at with COVID.
Yes.
And now I think a lot of people returned back to the polls, and those mail-in votes weren't as impactful as it was 2 and 4 years ago.
now I got to tell you, I'm old school. I show up at the poll, usually at 7. I had an appointment at the gym yesterday morning at 7, so I didn't get there till 7:30. But I show up at the poll and I vote in person. I just do that every year, and I probably won't stop that. But if you've not been to the new election headquarters, and I say new, it's not all that new, but it's relatively new at the old Food Lion building on Virginia Avenue. It's a nice facility, and they have a lot of parking. It was very easy to get in and out. One of the things that impressed me, you talk about people that exercise their civic duty and realize the benefit that we have as citizens of this country and the ability to vote. There was a guy, he had to be in his 90s. He drove a car in, he parked, the parking lot was pretty busy. He parked where like right across from me, because there was a fair amount of people in the parking lot. And to see him walk, I mean, he could barely walk, but by golly, he got into that election headquarters, he voted, he did what he needed to do. That was, and I'm not a young guy anymore, but that was very, I love that.
No, it was funny. I was with some of coworkers, and everyone had a voter war story for the day. What they went through to actually vote at the polls. Some people said they were sitting in their car waiting for the polls to open and stood in line. So I think there's some of that that culture that's still tied to showing up to that polls, and being present, standing up to be counted. And I think that's still part of being American, right? Just that going out and doing what it takes to stand in the polls. And the options to vote outside of that just allows everybody to be counted in case there's obstacles that prevent you from doing so. So it went smoothly, but I want to send a thank you to everybody who served in the polling stations over the last couple of weeks, from early voting up through today. I know we never have enough people, but for everybody who showed up and went above and beyond their civic duty to volunteer during this time to make sure that everybody went through the polls safely and securely and efficiently, thank you for your service. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And if you've seen our elections director from the county on this show, you know the extent that they go through in this county, and I think frankly in the state of Maryland. We obviously in the past there's been accusations of voter fraud and so forth, and I'm sure at some level voter fraud exists everywhere, right? It just does. The question is, how pervasive is it?
Right.
And I think the safeguards we have in this county and in this state, I am very confident personally in the results of the elections that we hold.
Well, I think with COVID, as we were saying the last time, and all the controversy that came out over Pennsylvania, and remember we took 6 days for the final vote, and they had a graph last night when I watched on the TV. It was like, Trump was ahead, Biden was behind. I think it was 900,000 votes, and then it got less and less, and then drug out, and you can see the lines coming to the point it crossed about day 3 or 4, to where then I think Mr. Biden then went up to 200 and some thousand ahead, but that's. But I think with what happened this year with no COVID and the fact that the Pennsylvania got their act together, they had a better way of counting the votes.
Right.
And they, to my knowledge, I knew there was some mishap in I think it was Wisconsin. They had a thing with one of the machines, but for the way they reported, I think all that cheating, as you would say, or something that would be illegal. It kind of put my mind at rest that it doesn't go on as much as because of the way they reported very quickly out of the Philadelphia area, which was the place that was getting all the attention as far as something being corrupt.
Yeah, and let's also point out there weren't people who were obstructing the process either this time, because there were some places where there were people outside protesting and people were threatening violence. We heard some of that. I know there was some bomb threats that happened. I heard of, and of course we know the election boxes that were destroyed, but not to the degree that we've seen in our prior elections. So I think that comfort and being able to do the job without obstruction also sped up the process as well. But I did want to point out in 2020 there was a little over 25,000 registered voters in the city of Hagerstown.
25,000.
So if that stayed close to true, we still had less than half of the voter population showed up to the polls.
Yeah, pretty sad.
It is.
Yeah, very much so.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's talk about Hagerstown Council. Matthew Schindler, appointed, now out. Peter Perini, appointed, ran for more than one election in the past, unsuccessfully, now out. We have we have Christian Alshire. We have Tiara Burnett. We have Erica Bell. We have Carolyn Anderson and Sean Flaherty are our winners. Leroy, what say you?
Well, first of all, I mean, you have people like that have come forward, like Schindler, and of course Peter Perini, know him well, friends from way back, construction and so forth. But it's like we have different people that are getting into this. We don't know who they are. But we just want to make it work. The thing with the city being nonpartisan, when you get to a smaller, a city election like that, I think they do it right. And of course, most of all your municipalities do a nonpartisan type voting, and it makes it good because you're really voting on the individual, not the party. And I do like that.
But is there really any such thing as a nonpartisan election? Because if you look at the Democratic Central Committee's Facebook page or the Republican Central Committee's Facebook page, they have their list of what city council people you should vote for, what school board people, all of those nonpartisan elections.
Well,
they more or less give away the secret.
That's true.
Thumb on a scale, absolutely.
Yeah, that's true. But there again, I think I look back at Doug Mullendore, who was our sheriff, and good friend, great sheriff all those years. But there was a time back in 2006, I think a fellow's last name was Woods, that ran for sheriff. And it was one of those years that because he was a Democrat and Mr. Woods was a Republican, that he about lost, the election.
Yeah.
And we would have, because of that. In fact, it's interesting, I put a bill in when I was in the House that would make the treasurer and the sheriff and the clerk of court all, once again, nonpartisan, and they didn't like it. There's people still like their party lines, but yeah, there's reason. But you have, I think Tiara and Christian, they're going back on there, and Christian Elshire's been in the city, in the county, very willing to serve. And a very knowledgeable young man. I mean, he's not a young man like we're all getting older, but he knows the stuff and knows the numbers, and I think should be very thankful that Christian is willing to serve. But I guess the thing I do see is when I look back at the days of the individuals that were the Bill Brickners and so forth that were there, those names have all disappeared, and I'm a big believer in. The fact that I believe as a citizen, as a business person as I was, I'd like to see more people that that are in that decision making and run businesses, help run the city, the county, the state, because it's really a business.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
And I think my personal opinion is that if you have ever been responsible for signing a paycheck at the end of the week, it gives you an entirely different perspective on what it means to have, it's a lot of pressure.
Yeah. And I don't think it's just limited to being a business owner. There's so much need in the community where there's service that you can be standing out as well. Like, the first time I see your name shouldn't be on a ballot, right? Again, at least hear from you to some degree, especially if you're engaged and involved in the community to a certain degree. I should be able to pull up some information now in the world of social media and everything else on the internet and really learn about you as an individual and you being my representative. So I think I agree with that to a degree as well, that some notoriety, some engagement in the community, some familiarity really feels better about when you're voting. It's hard to just vote for somebody when you don't know who they are. And I'll say,
not to, maybe I should step back on that. You don't have to be a business person, own a business, whatever. And you're exactly right. I believe that there's people that that head a lot of our agencies in the community that would be someone that I would like to see, because they're invested in the community, that they should be serving on a city council or a school board or whatever.
absolutely. I was just building on what you were saying from business standpoint, because I agree with that as well. But, and I'll say this, and this may make people uncomfortable, but you got to look at the numbers, and you got to look at trends. I'm a numbers guy. I look at trends. Alphabetically, the individuals who got the largest amount of votes fell in order alphabetically, to a degree, right? If you look at the numbers, everyone else, Schindler, Perini, Owens, Michaels, they had a big gap in between them. Going back to those who may not knew who they were, people probably had a tendency to go first 5 boxes when they voted.
Wow, there's a conspiracy theory, right?
It's the
But
truth.
no, he's exactly right, Dale.
So
Yeah.
Peter Perini and Matt Schindler should change their names to Adams and something else.
The ballot shouldn't be alphabetical. I think it should be randomized to a certain degree, certain positions, because it happens consistently. You go back several years, it's the same trend, especially in this race here. First you believe you have to pick all 5, which isn't true.
Right.
You have to pick up to 5, and most people don't understand that.
But they don't want to leave one on the table.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they go in, and if you say, I don't know who these people are, I'm not familiar with who our city council is, I want to vote, I want to be counted, you pick the first 5 boxes, right? Some people didn't see these names until they walked in and cast their votes yesterday.
Exactly.
And of course, they want to be counted, they didn't want to leave it blank, and they picked the first 5. Not to say that they're like Flaherty. You have some that have a following, and I'm sure they had their base of individuals who still came in and voted for specific individuals, but most likely they voted for them, and then they voted chalk alphabetically down the line, which plays out mathematically. If you look at the numbers, it's exactly how it plays out.
So you had, that's a great point, because Aylshire, he's been number 1 for forever.
Every time he's been on
Yeah.
the ballot, 1 or
He
2.
has.
And,
Yes, and that's amazing. I think Kristen's a Democrat, and arguably it wasn't a good day to be a Democrat in Washington County yesterday, especially if you look at the school board. That's amazing. I don't know what the difference is. And Kristen, let the truth be told, Kristen can be a little prickly. I remember before I got to know him, back when they were debating whether they were going to move the hospital out of the city, and I wrote something to the councilman, and he sent me something back that was just not nice.
But Kristen does his homework.
He does.
And he supports the citizens that support him.
He's
there for a reason.
He has the data.
And once again, he, there again, I do know, or if he still is, a Democrat, but but that never mattered to me. Right. When he sat on the Board of County Commissioners, he challenged their, it wasn't rubber stamped. It was always a process where the subject was thoroughly vetted.
No, I think he moved towards independent. Last I remember that he had moved after he served as a Democrat. And went back to the city council. But I've butt heads with Kristen before. But he's a formidable challenger, right? He's going to bring his data, whether it's from his perspective, it may be true. You can agree to disagree. But absolutely, I don't think something comes to the table where he doesn't have an opinion and doesn't put some input into it. And I'd rather somebody speak up about an issue than sit silent about one when I ask them to be my representative. So I will give him that.
Yeah, and I appreciate his transparency about his views on his views. So yeah, I get that.
But I'm surprised, Carolyn Anderson. I don't know the individual. I believe she's new to the area, which lends to, outside of kind of the alphabetical thing that we talked about, lends to her having probably some voters. When we talk about recruiting businesses and individuals from outside and bringing them into the community, sooner or later we're going to see more people who want to serve in these positions that aren't from here, that that quote that gets thrown around a lot, that want to see change, that want to influence change, and that want to step up and serve. So I believe, from what I know, she may be one of those individuals. So I look forward to hearing what she contributes as well.
So you weren't here for this, Leroy, but last week in the predictions, Mr. Moore was certain that Mr. Schindler would be elected.
Oh.
Mr. Moore was certain that Ms. Michael would be elected, Mr. Flaherty, Ms. Burnett, and Mr. Alshire. So you have a pretty good track
Three
record.
for five.
Yeah, that's not horrible.
Well, another thing, I think I told you earlier that I know Bill McIntyre very well. I mean, he's for many, many years. Good guy, good business head, will do a fine job for the city, okay, running the city. And the thing I was able to speak to him today, and what impressed me is he's already reached out to all these people. He's very satisfied. I mean, it's a group. You have Tierra, who's I think done a fine job on the city council, and of course he knows Christian and has already talked to him. But I think that they have different ideas. But he does think that it's a group, even though it's a new group, that he can work well with.
And that's my question. What are their ideas? Because I didn't hear it.
Mm-hmm.
I think
We talked about this throughout the entire election. I don't think we heard them. I don't think we heard about how they were going to deal with the drug issue. I don't think we heard about what the priorities should be for the city. I don't think we heard about continued downtown revitalization.
And
I heard none of it.
And I apologize for the fact of being someone who's in the county, owning a lot of property in the city. I guess I should pay more attention, but I don't get a vote.
No.
And the thing is, I don't know what those issues are. I would think, and I guess just we all know that there's drug problems. We all know that there's homeless problems. And I think if we, as a community, I think we have to look to try to solve some of those problems, as well as the fact of do we have enough policemen? Do we have enough people on the street? I mean, there's things like that I think are very important. And instead of
and we need to engage everyone that is willing to be engaged to solve those problems.
Yes.
I don't think the city council can solve those problems on their own. I don't think any city council can
No.
across the United States, even if you've got rock stars. I don't think it can just be the businesses. I don't think it can just be the individuals. I don't think it can just be the nonprofits. I think this is going to take a concerted effort, and that's why I appreciate and support Senator Quarterman and his bringing this to the forefront, because I also think that the great things that are happening downtown, and be assured, there's a lot of them: the baseball stadium, the Maryland Theater, the Barbara Ingram School for the Arts, University Systems of Maryland and Hagerstown, some of the new development, the new apartment building or the renovated apartment building. There's a lot of great things, and I think that if we don't do something about that, we're going to lose some of that momentum. And I think, in my view, that those forward things are making those problems, when nobody was downtown, the problems weren't as obvious because nobody was seeing them. Now they're much more obvious.
Yep, I agree. I think it's going to take a collective effort. I did want to point out that those who were appointed struggled to get elected.
Yes.
And I believe Shelley McIntyre may be the only one that I've known has been appointed and was able to come back and win an election. When her term came up and she put her name on the ballot, which I'm not sure what that is. I don't know. Maybe you can't do enough, but it's a clean slate right now, and I hope this council puts everything behind them. We know what the issues are. Right, and when I asked that rhetorically of what are their solutions, what do they stand for? I hope that over the next couple of weeks, someone like Bill who can reach out and start to unify these individuals and start building. I love to hear that already. Like start having these conversations, and I believe, and I'll say this as well. Bill started having those conversations 3 months ago. I've seen him at the ballpark having those conversations. Yes. So he really started that early, especially when he realized that he was going to run unopposed and that the sitting mayor wasn't in the election either, that he had a path to do the job. And I always say, do the job you want in the job you're in, right? And I think he was preparing for that. So I do give him credit for that work and him reaching out and him having those conversations across the community already. So I'm looking forward and I'm optimistic about some collaborative conversation, and hopefully somebody who can also mend that bridge between the city and the county. And I think that has been headline and big issues as well.
Yeah.
And
One more thing.
Go ahead.
I got to when my mind clicks, I got to click it. I think there's a lot of individuals from the from the private sector that have come in and said, "Hey, look, we want the ball stadium. Senator Quarterman did a great job of getting the state the money." So I hope it's not something we sit back and look at these individuals and say, "Now what are you going to do?" I think we have to continue to work with them.
Absolutely.
And because there's a lot of good things. 'Cause, I think we all have been downtown Frederick, and what they've done with Carroll Creek, and it's just it's beyond amazing. Could you imagine? I mean, I know we don't have water running through the city of Hagerstown, but I've been down to Carroll Creek and some of the festivals and things like that, and kind of jealous the way they've done it. But that's taken years of cooperation.
And a combined effort.
And a combined effort, right. And I think there's a lot of great things going, and we got some really good people that are behind all that. So let's just keep it going. And I hope that if anyone does see this and sees how we just need the city and the county to work with these business individuals that are pushing this in the state, that collectively, instead of trying to be the big dog, trying to be in charge.
Yep.
We've got a lot more election results to cover, but right now we're going to take a break. We hope you will join us back in just about 2 minutes as we continue with election coverage on the FlipSide. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the show. Well, let's turn our attention to the Washington County Board of Education. And my overarching comment there is, what in God's name happened? Stan Stauffer, Melissa Williams, Peter Bickford, all out.
That sort of blows that ABC down the street down a little bit.
Only Leroy Myers, she's the only one. She was the outlier there.
Yeah.
The rest top list. Yeah, I think this was a call for change.
Based on what?
Change for change. I really believe that there's a frustration in the air with everything, and there was a need for change. And I think anyone who was sitting in a seat was at risk of losing it right now, across the board. And I think we've seen a lot of that. And I think a lot of people wanted something different, and they were ready to roll the dice with someone or something different, despite not having a great understanding of where they were at right now. And there's been so much that's gone on in the last probably 5 years, you include the COVID year, that I think this was people just reacting more so than to something new. Again, Peter Bickford, no way. That shocked me. When I seen Peter, I thought he was a shoo-in. I would have easily bet that he was going to be one of the top vote getters.
I thought Melissa Williams was a shoo-in. I thought Stan Stauffer was probably a shoo-in.
But that takes nothing away from those who won. But these are once again, as Leroy pointed out, there's some new names, right? And I think it was a lot about moving from the old regime. Not saying I agree with it, but I think that's the sentiment. That's the only way I can make sense of it.
Let's not take away the fact that you had 3 people that I know for a fact worked their tails off.
Agreed.
Okay? I mean, Ms. Beachley worked very hard. I know that Charlie Burkett, he put more signs up than I've ever seen him put up before. And he coming in first doesn't surprise me a bit. And as well as McCusker, they said she was all over Facebook and did such a masterful job of campaigning.
Agreed.
And I have to say, I saw a few Stan Stauffer signs. I didn't see much on the Peter Bickford signs.
No, you didn't.
And so it's like, did it get to a point where you had one guy working very hard and the other guy taking it for granted. And I think that's what
point.
I think that's what we're looking at here, because I agree with you, Terrence. There's no way that Peter Bickford. I mean, I was amazed when I saw that he came in 6th. I was.
Yeah, I was shocked. I mean, the reality is, in terms of the Board of Education, is there something we can point to that is a major problem in our school system right now? I can't think of anything.
I can. It's the blueprint. It's been big. How we pay for it. We're still.
But is that a county thing?
It's not a county thing, and that's the thing. It's
so
not,
why are we holding our county elected officials?
Have you ever been to a school board meeting?
Yes.
Is it well attended?
No.
No. I think a lot of people aren't engaged in where they can truly make a difference and impact the education. And what they do get are sound bites and big news, and not really understand the level of impact that those in position can really do anything about it. And they hold them accountable for it. And I've had conversation with people, our teachers need to make more money. Okay, where is it coming from? How do we do that? How do we compete with other counties? Do you know how much we get on our budget from how much the state is giving to the counties? It's a lot of information, and I think people gravitate to what they know of. And I know there was some confusion over Blueprint of how things rolled out, and I think that's what people are listening to. And I don't think anything per se that I can speak to these individuals that did anything that I would say glaring they failed our students. I don't believe it. I believe this was in the hands of the voters a lot of the times, and even things about religion in school and what kind of books are in our libraries. I think those are big soundbite media issues that people really pulled into a smaller race. Again, I can only assume. I can't speak for all voters. So these are opinions, these are assumptions, but based on conversations, that's what I think may have been some of the deciding factors.
Well, April, I think, was the only one returned that was an incumbent.
She was the lowest vote getter in the primaries.
Yes.
and it's
we thought we were writing her off, right?
Not me. She was on my pick.
Was she on your pick?
Well, but she also worked very hard. I mean, the Zentmeyer signs that were out, and there it gets back to, and I don't like to use whatever, but I know how hard I had to work in 2002, and I had to get out there, and eventually that sticks. And these other ones that, Miss Beachley, is it Burkett or Burkett?
Burkett.
But in McCusker, they all worked very, very hard. And I think that, and you look at the 21,000 for Peter? Yes, it's 3,000 votes behind Zentmeyer, who was 4. It's, did she work that extra hard? I think so. I think that's what, and once again, it's not that it's down ballot, but I know that's not as important. And being in an election year, they're going to go there. And how many people, as we talked about before, I run into people and they say, I like to have this. Well, why don't you talk to one of your county commissioners? Which one? Don't you know any of them? They couldn't name me the county commissioners.
Yeah.
And how many people can name the school board members? And so if they can't name the school board members, they don't know who they are. But then again, get back to our conversation of they're there in the booth and there's a couple people I got to vote for school board. How many of those people?
Zentmeyer sounds like a good name.
Yeah. But how many people? How many of those? The Beachley B, Burkett B. How many got your, clicked off that vote just because they were there voting for the president? And
I agree.
Yeah.
And we say this as well too. A lot of people don't really understand how important the school board is to everything, our workforce, business, our economy. Like they make the foundational decisions in education that really generate into our workforce. So even those who don't have children or no longer have children in school may not seem as engaged in this election right now as well when it comes around school board. So I think some of that takes into consideration. Again, I'm voting, I don't have any children, school board, whatever names, I'll check the boxes. Again, and this is an assumption because I'm sure there's a lot of educated voters that went into the booth and made a decision based on maybe some of the conversations they had with some of these candidates, especially with those who decided to do some door knocking or who put out their literature out on social media. Could it be an issue of complacency that, school board is running well and we're doing all we can do? We don't have any major issues. Do we stick status quo and run chalk? Could have been. I don't know. I don't know if they
So
took the time
you were 1 for 4. You picked Zentmeyer. You also picked Williams, Stauffer, and Bickford.
Absolutely. And I would pick them again, not knowing these results.
Reggie and I were 1 for 4. We picked Burkett. We picked Bickford, Stauffer, and Williams.
That's who I would, if I was part of that. That's exactly who I would have picked.
So there you go.
Yeah. I mean, as far as not that knowing a couple of the individuals how hard they worked, but I also know Peter, I also know Stan, and there again, I don't know what type of a job or any problems they're having, within the board itself in their meetings.
Right.
But I thought it was running fine. I think they've got a good superintendent.
Yes.
I think he's doing an excellent job.
Dr. Savine.
From what I hear, when you don't hear bad, it's got to be
Exactly.
So
We'd hear the bad news.
we would hear the bad news,
Yes,
right?
for sure.
So, to that degree, I mean, how in the world would the incumbents not be, all three of them?
Right.
Right.
I think Zentmeyer is the only one that will be returning. And that I think I look at that as a positive. I'm glad to see at least someone is returning, and because you want some familiarity as well. You want some process. You want to make sure that learning curve is is not as steep as you expect it to be when coming into this position when some of them may not have any kind of political or
Yeah. Now, of course, we've got 3
educators.
So
7.
Yeah, there's 7 total.
Right.
4 get voted in one year, and 3 get voted in the following.
Right.
You got to wonder if those results would have been different if this were not a presidential election.
Right. And to that degree of the what they call it, alternating
Right.
years and so forth. Not too sure that shouldn't be across the board. I mean, I'm talking about with county commissioners,
Right.
and so forth. That really gives continuity because even like the state of Maryland. I mean, although it's almost impossible for it to happen, but you could have, when the governor's race, you could have the whole slate, every delegate, every senator. You could have 100% new people
Right.
that wouldn't have an idea where to start, without some continuity.
Let's talk about Maryland 6th District. Our friend Neil Parrott has run for that seat now 3 times, 4 times?
No, it hasn't been 4. I think it's only been 3.
Several
But,
times.
Yeah.
And
Well, I really thought this time, when he ran against David Trone, and who run a fantastic campaign, and really went out and reached out to a lot of people. I mean, look at Brooks House, what he come up here and got invested in that, and he was been tough. But when they did the redistrict, and when Hogan changed the lines, it made District 6 a lot more competitive for
It
a
did.
Republican. I really thought that, because he was running against April Delaney, I thought it would be close, but I thought he could pull it out. But I don't know where it's at today, but they said the Associated Press is not calling yet, but last I saw, he was down 315 votes.
that's exactly what he's down right now. I just updated
Yeah,
the
so-
sheet. Yeah, he's down 315 votes. And I need to make this point, too. If you wonder, you say, well, why should I vote in Maryland? The Democratic presidential candidate will always win. In fact, last night, when the polls closed at 7 o'clock, they called Maryland at 7:01 with 0% of the votes in.
Right.
Right? I mean, that's how blue we are.
Yeah.
But 315 votes.
And he was ahead down to the last.
Yes,
was
he was.
it 214 precincts or 224? What is it?
Yeah, I don't know.
It was on that
Yeah.
tally sheet, but I was watching it until I guess it was almost 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, me
but,
too.
It came down in the very last. He was ahead like 300 or 400, and then when that last precinct come in, he went down to 300.
And mail-in ballots were the differentiator. He was stronger in early voting. He was stronger on election day, poll voting, and she doubled him in mailing votes. And that's what the biggest differentiator in this election was for him. And 300 votes is still a slim margin. Again, there's still votes that need to be counted. But they're coming in mail, considering the proportion of mailing votes that she did, that percentage is hold true, then he still is going to be difficult for him to make up that 300 votes.
And that does. I mean, I knew in my races itself, especially the first time, when they counted the absentees and the provisional ballots, they almost went the same percentages as what the counties went in Washington and Allegheny County. It was almost identical percentage.
Which makes sense.
Which makes sense,
Right.
yes.
Yeah.
You know, so if these votes that they have coming in, if there's more of them from Montgomery County, she's going to get more votes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Here's another shocker for me. Angela Brooks beats Larry Hogan by a comfortable 7-point margin. I know you called this, Terrence. I wasn't wrong, because I changed my opinion
Yes.
just seconds before it came across the. No, I didn't. Angela Brooks won. I'm very surprised by that. Larry Hogan was a centrist who had 70+% approval rating on the way out.
77%.
On the way out.
On the way out, that's right.
That's overall. That's not just with Republicans. I just don't understand this.
Well, you know, it goes back to what we were saying earlier about qualifications for a job. And, you know, if someone hasn't proven themselves to be a leader and to be someone who can work across party lines and work in the middle like Larry Hogan did for 8 years and did I just think a fantastic job for the state of Maryland. And I think I'd be guessing, but it was around $4 billion of surplus when he left. So that's the guy I want to be watching the state of Maryland, and taking nothing away from Ms. Brooks, but the fact who, in my opinion, forget about party lines, was more qualified. But there again, he gets down to, you know, voting the party, and once again, we're in a very blue 2-to-1 state when it comes to in fact, I think there's more independents in Maryland now almost than there is Republicans. It's getting close.
Yeah, I don't know the exact numbers, but I believe so. That just makes sense as people kind of come to be the center, right? Because we see so many extremes on the Democrat side and so many extremes, again, the squeaky wheels of the parties that really take the headlines. I think people feel being independent is the neutral ground to a standpoint, instead of not really understanding that the majority of both parties are more centrist, as Jim points out all the time as well. But with this, again, I knew she was going to win. I felt she was going to win. I didn't know for sure, but I had a strong feeling that she would win. I thought it would be a little closer, though. I think I called it around 3 points. You know, that I said that she would come in at. I thought more people would come out because of Hogan's ability to work both sides. I thought he was going to be bringing voters from both sides of the aisle to come in. I just think, again, I think it's name, right? I think some people had a problem with Hogan. I think Hogan, because I think he played the center too much in his campaigning over the last couple of months. And it seemed like he started to waver. Was he with the Republicans? Was he not with the Republican regime? Was he going to be? Did he sound like he was independent? Where did he truly stand? And I think he never really just took a stand and pushed forward. And I think he got on the defensive too early about the abortion issue that came out. I think he just put himself on the defensive and didn't lean in on what he had done for the state as governor over the last his 8-year time frame. I think that surplus of $4 billion, I think to some people, we realized it wasn't truly a surplus of $4 billion after we seen just a year later, after everything was said and done, it became more of a deficit was still there, and then we're dealing with some of that. So I think he was very qualified as far as really taking this election. I thought he was going to have this. I thought he was strong at first. I just think when Kamala came into the race, she brought in different voters and a different look at some of the major issues like abortion, like women's rights that came up a lot more. And I believe the perception of his history and some of the things they attacked him on put him out of favor.
You're absolutely right. And I'm going to say this, recognizing that one person's opinion a consensus does not make. But my neighbor and I were having a conversation, and my neighbor was talking about, he asked me if I voted, and I said, not yet, because obviously I vote on election day. But long story short, he said, "Are you voting for Hogan?" And I said, "Yeah, I definitely am." And I said, "How about you?" And he said, "No." He said, "Because this, if Hogan's on, that's the vote they need to take away women's rights." And I tried to explain that the Supreme Court sent it back to the states, so there's
we're entrenched.
Right, we're there.
We got that satisfied.
The only thing that's going to change it is another Supreme Court decision, which they're not going to overturn their own decision 3 months after they make it. That's just dumb. But yeah, it was interesting, and I think also Brooks' ads were effective, more effective, obviously, than.
Well, I think the one ad that they had in there where the individual saying, "I loved him as a governor, but I will not vote for him as a senator." Yeah. And if you really dissect that, it's like, yeah, I'll hire you for this job, but this is this is different, and this is much more of a legislative type thing. Over here, you're an executive of the state of Maryland. You're making some money decisions and business decisions. Over here, you're one of 100, and he would be voting with the Republicans.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we don't talk a lot about national issues on this show. We try to keep it local, but I think we would be remiss if we didn't bring up the national politics and some of the things that happened there, because I think there were many surprises in that world. We're going to do that right after this break. Stay tuned. We'll be back with FlipSide. Welcome back to the show. We're going to do a lightning round, folks. We've only got probably 5-6 minutes, but I want to talk about the national election. I know you can turn on any TV channel and get it, but let's add our flavor to it. Number one, they thought this was going to be a squeaker for the presidential race. It was anything but. It was a historic comeback. Even MSNBC, who I'm sure was not happy with the results, had to admit that this was a once-in-a-lifetime occurrence. Only the second time in the U.S.'s history where a president was elected and then not elected and then elected again. Leroy, what say you?
About the fact that he won?
Yeah. Why did she lose?
Why did she lose? I really personally do not think that it was close at any time. I think that the Trump vote that was not in the mix as far as when it came to any polls, there was always 2 or 3 points out there, and I think that's why you saw where Wisconsin, I think, was 6%. I think that's why you saw Pennsylvania. There was the last couple of days, depending on which poll you looked at, it was like, he was behind 2 points. He was behind a point. He was ahead a point, and that all went away on election night. And I just really believed that internally, that the Republican Party knew what they really knew, and not what they were telling the pollsters.
Terrence?
I think it was the economy. That's what it boils down to. And going back to what I said before, I think people are frustrated. People are feeling the pinch. Winter is here, right? And I think everybody wanted, not everybody, but a large amount of people and again, this was one time I think at one point he's at the point of winning the popular vote, which he hadn't in the last 2 elections. So not only do you win the electoral commandingly, the popular vote, and that's a vote for just change, period. I don't know, we're in a time right now where we may see a president every 4 years anyway now, because no one wants to wait to 8 years to see kind of any change or anything go into place. So we may start seeing a change in regime every 4 years. we have a different voter base that are controlling the polls as well. So I think some of that that played out. Why did she lose? I think if she was running her own race, she would have had a better position, but she seemed like a concession when they introduced her in August. I think they waited too long. I think Biden should have stepped down a year ago. I think he should have gave her a longer runway to come. It just seemed like it was forced on everybody all of a sudden. Come in August, now she's running, and now like it was a lot to happen in a compressed time, and I think she had that newness bump in August, but as it kind of out, I heard a lot of people that said, I'm not interested in either one of the candidates. So I think that played.
Yeah, absolutely. That's where I was, frankly. I think that my opinion is that, number one, she was just a bad candidate. She was. And, you know, they talk about 20/20 vision in hindsight. I started thinking about this morning when I got up, and at least for me, my opinions became very clear. She's a bad candidate. She's not the right, she has never won anything at that level. She doesn't have the experience. She was a quiet vice president under President Biden and couldn't separate herself from him. I think the Democratic Party made a mistake in not having some level of primary. I don't know how you do that with 107 days before, but there was a mistake. I agree with you 100%. Biden should have gotten out of the race a year ago, not 107, 105 days ago. It's just not good.
It would be interesting to really know, I would say, the truth when it came to what was going on for all those months, and you know the accusations of, didn't you see that he was in decline? Didn't you see that there was a problem?
Well, obviously she did.
They
all did.
But to make the statements that says this guy can work rings around, you know, and I'm thinking, who are they looking at? And you're right. I mean, you know, if this was, if it was 3 months back, if it was in February or March, they would have had time to do something, which they could have done, to get more candidates. And to exactly what you're saying, I don't think she would have fared.
Yeah.
You know.
And I'll disagree here. She had a resume. She has a much better resume than President Trump. Completely. I think she's done it. She's been elected. She's worked in government. She's a vice president. So I think she had the resume. I just think no one related to her, and she didn't feel like you trusted her. Right?
No.
I think that's what it was. I think she just came out of somewhere. And again, she was the vice president, but as we know, vice presidents usually take a back seat. But I think when she came, you didn't connect with her. And I don't think she had the charismatic leadership that's tied to someone that's going to get in there and do something different. I think a lot of people tied her to the Biden administration, and it was just going to be 4 more years of the same.
And she did nothing. She did nothing to untie herself from the Biden administration.
But why, when all this controversy was going on, Terrence, why were we always hearing about Gretchen Whitmer? Why we were hearing about Shapiro? Why we were hearing about the Gavin Newsom?
Right.
You know, we were not ever hearing, when all this was taking place, of we need to switch. We never heard her name mentioned.
Yeah.
It was always one of these
we
other
are
people.
We are absolutely out of time, so I've got to stop the discussion there. I'm going to leave you with one thought. I think that she's gone. I think she's done. I don't think we're going to see her back. And I think personally the biggest mistake she made in the last 24 hours was not making a call last night. It was obvious to everyone in this country that she lost, and she failed to make the call. She left her supporters standing, and that's not a good look.
And even Hillary did that.
That's right. And I'll take the last word on that. That's all the time we have tonight. We hope you will follow us on Facebook. We hope you will, or actually like us on Facebook, follow us on X. We hope you will send your comments and suggestions to feedback@flipsidetv.com. That's feedback@flipsidetv.com. Most importantly, join us again next week for another visit to the Flip Side. Good night.